I'm sure you have heard the story. It's the story of the monkey and the crocodile. The crocodile was always wanting to eat the heart of the monkey because that was considered delicacy for the crocodile, right? So what happened was the crocodile tried to make friends with the monkey, who was always on the tree. But the monkey never trusted the crocodile. But one day the crocodile, out of intense sincerity, somehow or another convinced the monkey. And monkey said, all right, now let us develop friendship. So the next day crocodile came and said, is there something you like to eat? So monkey said, actually in the middle of this big lake where you are swimming, there's a nice island. On it there's a coconut tree. And on it there's a banana tree, and there's a nice banana, and I like to eat bananas. So can you bring me there? So the crocodile said, I'm your friend. Since you can't cross over, I will bring you there. So monkey got on the back of the crocodile and they started going. But halfway through the crocodile stops. So the monkey says, my dear friend, why have you stopped here? Crocodile said, because even though you are hungry, I am also hungry. And even though your food is banana, you are my food. So then monkey says, my dear crocodile, why didn't you tell me that you wanted to eat me, specifically my heart? So crocodile said, why? Well, what do you mean? I mean, if I told you, you won't come with me. The monkey said, I'm your friend. So if you want to eat my heart, all you have to do is tell me. Because don't you know that we monkeys, we have a tradition. So crocodile said, what tradition is this? Our tradition is wherever we go, we keep our heart in the base camp, where our tree is. So my base camp is on the tree, and my heart is there. So next time, if you want it, don't swim all the way here. Tell me about it, I'll go to the tree and I'll get it. So why don't you turn back, bring me to the tree, I'll give you my heart. So crocodile thought, what a nice friend monkey is. It's really worth making such friends, you know, they allow you to eat them also. So he turns around, goes back. When he goes back, the monkey goes up. When the monkey goes up, crocodile says, monkey, monkey, come down, I want your heart. And the monkey says, you are foolish, my friend, because I today realize that we cannot become friends because you are after my heart and you are going to eat it. So Prabhupada paused, and the devotees were not sure what he meant. So Prabhupada said, what I mean is, we may have to mix with the whole world externally, and we use our mind and our senses always externally, but our heart must always be with Krishna. You cannot do that with Patanjali's system of yoga. You can't. Because your heart can be in the last TV movie that you saw or the radio song that you heard, and just breathe here, breathe there, and you're finished. It's mechanical. Maybe it'll improve your health, but can it improve your consciousness in a difficult age like Kali Yuga? That is what Prabhupada is saying. So please don't misunderstand Prabhupada. Prabhupada never said Patanjali's system of yoga is not approved, but he says that it is mechanical, and he uses two words in the lecture which is very important. He says it is difficult, and he says it can sometimes be challenging. So it's very important as devotees, when we present bhakti, we should not present bhakti in a fanatical manner, that even if those who are trying other systems, instead of becoming convinced from their heart, they get put off by what we say. You see, the monkey has taught us something very important, that when we as devotees also perform bhakti yoga, Jai Jagannath Baldev Subhadra Mai Ki, we must ensure that whenever we perform devotional service, whenever we are doing any kind of service to the devotees, the service must be with our hearts. We cannot leave our heart in a tree. When we perform bhakti, the heart must be in place. When we have our heart in place, then even if there are some discrepancies, even if there are some difficulties, perhaps we're not very expert in yogic postures, perhaps as Sukracharya says very famously, mantratas tantratas chitram. Maybe we don't chant the mantras very well. Maybe our pronunciation is not very good. Maybe our understanding of place, time, and proper way of doing yajnas is not very expert. Maybe the time, maybe the place, desha, kalartha, vastutaha, maybe vastu is also all wrong. But as long as we are chanting Krishna's names, and chanting Krishna's names means we have to chant with our heart. If we chant Krishna's names, then whatever discrepancies, right? Chidram means discrepancies. Nischidram means no discrepancies. Whatever we do, even if there are discrepancies, they become faultless actually. This is very important point. And that is what Prabhupada immediately emphasizes in the lecture. He was not interested to go into the description of the different airs. In fact, in the whole lecture, he doesn't even talk about air. he goes straight into Bhakti Yoga, and he uses that as an opportunity to tell everyone that this Bhakti Yoga system is about controlling the mind. But he gives a very nice difference. He says that when you perform a system like Patanjali Yoga, then what happens is you have to rely on your own self to control your mind. In other words, it is very difficult to control the mind. Prabhupada says the mind is like a child. In the lecture he says the mind is like a child. And what is the nature of the child? That it cannot keep still. Children cannot keep still. Have you tried keeping your children still at a certain age? Absolutely impossible. How many times we have children of a certain age and then sannyasis come and senior disciples come, and we all have this blood pressure going on because we don't know when the children will become a source of potential distraction. Why? Because it's their nature. You cannot fault them actually. You can't fault them. So Prabhupada says you cannot fault the mind because the nature of the mind is like it is a child. It cannot keep still. Cannot keep still. If I continue too long, you also cannot concentrate on the lecture. I also cannot concentrate on my own lecture. What to speak of you? So the mind is so chanchal. That is what is stated, isn't it? Very nicely stated, chanchalam hi manaha krishnaha. Right? It is found in the sixth chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So nature of mind, Prabhupada says, 1, it is like child. 2, it always has one peculiar characteristic. And this is something we should take away today. The nature of the mind, Prabhupada says, is it's always accepting, rejecting. Accepting, rejecting. That is what it does. And Prabhupada says that's also what a child does. If you think very carefully, observe the nature of children. You find children's whole business, whole day is very simple. Accept something, reject something. Accept something, reject something. Have you noticed that? They will take something for a while, then they throw it away. Then the same thing that they had no interest in, suddenly they get interested in, and they throw it away. When we become adults, if you think carefully, we just become sophisticated versions of children. We also accept things. We also reject the same thing that we accept. For example, today you're my best friend. Tomorrow I don't like your face, no more good friends. The next day I'm in good mood, become best friends again. Some of you are smiling so much, because you know it's happening every day. Every day. The mind is rebelling always. My Guru Maharaj used to say, at least amongst friends, if you say today you're a good friend, bad friend, that's okay. Husband and wife, you got a problem. Because today you will say you are a good wife, tomorrow no, not good wife. Then what are you going to do? You're not going to find another wife. And the husband cannot say, oh, today I've lost interest in you, I'll go and find someone else. You see, but it is the nature of the mind. So Prabhupada says, nature of mind is, it accepts and it rejects. And Bhagavatam tells us this. You know who tells us this? Prahlad Maharaj. If you read 7th canto, 9th chapter, I think it is the 7th or the 9th, no, 17th verse. 17th verse. This verse is very important to understand the mind. Prahlad Maharaj says, Yasmat priya apriya viyoga samyoga janma sok apnigna sakalayo nishudaya manaha dukkha tarapi dukkha matadhyayam bhuman brahmami vadame tavadasya yogam. I would really request devotees to study this verse because Prabhupada translates it very beautifully. Prabhupada says, because of a combination of pleasing and displeasing circumstances. Because of a combination of pleasing and displeasing circumstances, and because of separation from them, what happens? One is placed in the most regrettable condition. So, Prahlad Maharaj is telling everyone, why is it that we are always regretting our life? Very often we live with so much regret. Why did I get married? Why did I not get married? Why did I study? Why did I join this job? Why did I come here? Why did I do that? Very, very seldom we are satisfied. Very, very seldom by nature this mind is satisfied. If we find something, we'll say it's good, but because the mind is accepting and then rejecting. This is what mind is doing. Why? Because it is pleasing and then something about it is displeasing. And because of that, we are always in a regrettable position. Regrettable means two things. One, we regret, and two, our position is regrettable. It is unfortunate. Why? Because it takes so much of time away from Krishna. We get into so much of muddle that we don't have time to properly chant Krishna's names. We don't have time to read Bhagavatam because we're always lamenting, always despairing. What happened if I did this? What happened if I did that? Because Prabhupada says we lack faith in Krishna. That's why we despair. And that's why we are in an unfortunate position. So always remember, even as you move around with devotees, try the experiment today. As you go down and have prasadam, as you talk to everyone, think about this verse. Because of pleasing and displeasing circumstances. Sometimes they combine, sometimes they separate. We are placed in the most regrettable position. So then Prabhupada translates Prahlad Maharaj. And that regrettable position becomes like hellish existence. Because it eats into our mind. And it becomes like burning sensation. That's why it is known as Sakala Yonishu, from the root. And from the root, it feels like so Agnina. Agni means to like fire. So we are caught in the fire of the meditation. Always lamenting, always despairing, always regretting. Why? Because of the push, pull of the mind. There is no peace to the mind. No peace. And Bhagavatam tells us by the end of our life, with all this push and pull, our senses become krichai. Krichai means exhausted. They become completely exhausted. That's why you see many people before they die, they're very exhausted actually. Their senses have failed them. But you see devotees, before devotees leave the world, their senses never fail them. In fact, their mind is so fixed with Krishna that even if they appear like they are in coma, even if they appear like they are in difficulty, when you chant, they can react. When you say Krishna's names, they can respond. Because their senses are not exhausted. Because an entire lifetime, they have not despaired. They have not had the push and pull. They have trained their minds with their hearts. That's why the crocodile and monkey is important. Our heart is with Krishna, even while we perform everything else. That is what keeps us here. But the Patanjali system, if we are not careful, it is merely exercise. It becomes mechanical. There's no heart involved. So this is first point Prabhupada says. And Prahlad Maharaj ends the verse by telling us the solution. He says, Dukhaushadam tarapi dukkam atadhyayam. He says that I believe that these material miseries, just to stop these miseries, we try to find the solutions. But we try to find it in the material world. And those who try to find it in the material world, Prahlad Maharaj's opinion is, the miseries are worse, the remedies to the miseries are actually worse than the miseries themselves. It's very true. If you try to solve one material problem with a material solution, you'll find your material solution will open the door to another material problem. But if you find that there is a material problem, but you say the only remedy is for me to become more fixed in devotional service. And if you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare, then the miseries become much more controllable, we can handle these miseries better, and they don't touch us. You can try it. Try to find a material solution to a material problem, and you'll find the solution is a disguise to another problem. But if you chant Krishna's names, then the whole matter ends there. The matter ends there. That's why even when devotees have disagreement, the best way to solve the disagreement is to do kirtan. You find that when you do kirtan with each other, no matter how much you wanted to beat him up, during kirtan you can look at each other. Many devotees have told me this, by the way. They say, Prabhu, when I look at him, I feel I must become Nrsingadev, and he wants to become Nrsingadev. But when we dance together, we just think of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Of course, it's good to think of Nrsingadev, but not that way. So the point is, material solutions are not the way forward. That's why Prabhupada says Bhakti Yoga is not that way. So Prabhupada then translates Prahlad Maharaj's prayer by saying that in my opinion, I think the only remedy is to engage in your service. Brahmami means as I wander in this world, I should simply engage in your service. And then he ends by saying, Prahlad Maharaj ends in that last line by saying, kindly instruct me in your service. See? That line is so nice. He's telling Nrsingadev, he's not asking for anything. All his prayer is asking is, Nrsingadev, you please instruct me in such service. This is the mood of a devotee. A devotee is asking for instructions on how to perform service. Which now brings us to the second point that Prabhupada is bringing up. Prabhupada says when Krishna told Arjuna that you please control your mind by yoga practice, Arjuna himself in 6:34, he himself says very clearly, Chanchalam hi manaha Krishna. He says, how is it possible? Pramati balavat. Balavat means very strong. This mind is so strong. So I want to read to you how Prabhupada translates 6:34 in the lecture. It's very nice when our Acharya sometimes gives a translation in a lecture of the Bhagavad Gita that he gives, because it gives you another insight sometimes. So Prabhupada translates it this way. I do not think the mind can be controlled. He translates this way. He says, Arjuna said, I do not think the mind can be controlled. It is very, very difficult as to control the breeze, strong and blowing. It is not possible to control them. This is how Prabhupada translates it. So actually Arjuna sounds in the translation like he's more affirmative, isn't it? He's telling Krishna, no Krishna, cannot control. Like the breeze and the wind, impossible. So then Prabhupada says, even the great yogis find it difficult to control the mind artificially. Then he gives the example of Vishwamitra. He says, look at Vishwamitra. Such a powerful, he started by being a Raja Rishi. Then he worked very hard with austerities to become a Deva Rishi. And then he became a Brahma Rishi. But in between all that, with all his austerities, he was still distracted by Menaka. And because of the distraction of Menaka, between him and the union of Menaka came Shakuntala. Years and years of austerity just went away because he was distracted. Then when he became very powerful, one king called Trishanku came to him. And Trishanku said, I have a desire. And Vishwamitra said, what is your desire? He said, my desire is to go to the heavenly kingdom in this material body. But I turned to Vashishta, my guru, and Vashishta said, nobody can go to the heavenly planets in this material body. You must give up this sharir. So can you do it? Because Vishwamitra was in competition at that time with Vashishta, even there also they had competition. So he thought, aha, so Vashishta said cannot, that means I must say can. You see, accept, reject, pleasing, displeasing. So what did he do? He used all the powers that he had accumulated, which was supposed to be for Jnana Dipite, which was supposed to be developing an urge for self-realization. He used all his powers to do only one thing, to move Trishanku up to the heavenly planets in his body. That's all. And that also became a big disaster. Because as he moved up and he came to the gates purely on the strength of Vishwamitra, at the gates of Swargaloka, Indra said, go back. He said, we don't want you here, go back. And you know why Indra said go back? Because you did not hear Vashishta, your original guru. You did not hear him. That's why you should go back. Very important thing. Then you turn to second guru, because you didn't want a guru. You were a servant of the senses, Indra said to Trishanku. You were not servant at the lotus feet of the spiritual master. You wanted a spiritual master who would serve your desires and your urges. So because of that, you cannot enter Swargaloka. And so Trishanku started falling. Did he repent? No, he said, Vishwamitra, help me. He didn't say, I'm sorry, I deserve to be in this situation. He said, Vishwamitra, help me. So Vishwamitra summoned whatever else power he had. And he said, even if you can't go up to heaven, you can't come down to earth, I'll create another heaven around you. And he used all his powers to create a constellation around Trishanku. So Trishanku is known as the constellation of Crux, C-R-U-X. It is an upside down sign of a human being. And it's up there in the constellation. And that's Mr. Trishanku. He's up there, upside down, hanging there. Neither this way nor that way, and cannot come back also. So in the end, Prabhupada makes the point that Vishwamitra used up everything he had just for one man and not for Jnana Dipite. Why? Because he was not following the route of Bhakti Yoga. Very important point. Second example he gives is Saubhari Muni from the 9th canto. You all know that Saubhari Muni practiced the Patanjali yoga system, Prabhupada says in the lecture. And then, not to be agitated by the surrounding circumstances of the land, he decided to go deep into the waters. And there he remained for thousands of years. Can you imagine his siddhi? How long can you last in water? we all know, he practically became one with the fish. And he stayed there for so many years, concentrating and controlling his breath, regulating his life air, until one day half an eyelid was open and he saw a fish, male and female, actually mating. That was all. He didn't see human beings, by the way. He only saw fishes. And the moment he saw the fish, he became agitated. Instead of the urge for self-realization, his urge for sense gratification took over. And within a few minutes, after years of controlling his senses, he came out of the water, went to the king and said, I want a daughter for marriage. And Prabhupada says, first he went to the king for one daughter. Then he realized the king had 8 daughters, so he said, give me the whole lot. So it wasn't just one daughter that he wanted 8. And was this the result of years and years of controlling of the senses in a mechanical way? So Prabhupada makes it a very important point. And in other places, Prabhupada brings up the point of Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was not even born into what we would call a traditional Brahmanical family. No. He had, technically speaking, so many material disqualifications. And yet, the testimony of the greatness of Haridas Thakur was that he became the Namacharya. And how do we know he became Namacharya? Because just before he was going to leave his body, Mahaprabhu had gone to him and heard that he was not well. And he asked him, what disease are you suffering from, Haridas Thakur? And Haridas Thakur said, I only suffer from one disease. And Mahaprabhu said, what is the disease? He said, I suffer from the disease of not being able to complete my prescribed rounds of chanting. I cannot complete my vow of chanting. That is my disease. Can you imagine? His disease was not, I have a kidney ailment, I have brain damage, my senses are not moving. No, he just said, I'm unable to complete my chanting. That gives you an understanding of how much heart Haridas Thakur must have put into devotional service. So if we can take a fraction of that, then we can understand how important it is to develop an urge for self-realization. And how unimportant it is to try and artificially control our senses. Because it is not possible, Prabhupada says. It's not possible. Which now brings us to the third section of this lecture. In the third section of the lecture, Prabhupada says, how do we then control our mind and senses? They need control anyway. So then Prabhupada says, our way is that we first accept the mind as the principal sense. Very important statement. He says we accept the mind as the principal sense. Very often we deny that the mind is a sense. We often say the sense organs are there and the mind controls. But Prabhupada says here that we should accept that the mind is principal sense. Indriyani parani ahur indriyebhya param manaha. He quotes from 342 of Bhagavad Gita. He says chief among the senses is actually the mind. Why is Prabhupada saying this? Prabhupada is saying that if we understand that the mind is the master, in other words, the mind is the main principal sense, then our main aim is somehow or another, if you want to control the mind, then engage it in the service of Krishna. So in Patanjali's system, control is done by mechanical means. In Bhakti Yoga system, control equals to engagement. See? If you stop using the word control, but if you turn it around and say, how do I engage my mind in Krishna's service? Then Prabhupada says, automatically without separate endeavor. The word that is used in Bhagavad Gita is yadrichayaha. Yadrichayaha means without separate endeavor. In the ordinary course of our actions as devotees, without thinking how to control the mind, just engage it. Supposing I sit here and I tell myself, I don't want to hear anything, I don't want to see anything, I don't want to do anything. It's very difficult. Very difficult. But what if I sit here trying to do that and somebody stands up and says, Prabhu, we need someone to serve prasadam. Then what happens? You go down immediately and you serve prasadam. Without knowing it, you have just controlled your mind. You have just controlled your mind. Of course, my Guru Maharaj used to say, when you're serving prasadam, please don't think about eating prasadam first. Or don't. There was one devotee who came and said, Maharaj, I find serving prasadam the most difficult exercise. Maharaj asked, why? Because he said intense control is needed. For two reasons. One, I see all the time I'm serving, but I'm not taking. And then second, very painful is when the congregation is very big and the prasadam is finishing very fast. I'm put into deep anxiety because how am I going to eat something? So that is where we need to engage our mind. The more we engage our mind and tell ourselves that we live for others, our satisfaction is when someone else is satisfied. That is the higher order of devotional service. Devotional service is not just confined to, I come, I get satisfied, forget about the rest of them. To hell with the rest of the world. I just come and do my satisfaction, just give me my prasadam, give me my space to sit, give me my space for service, and I'm done. No. Devotees always sacrifice. Remember? We are offering. Offering. The word that is used here very nicely is jubati. Jubati means to offer. So there are two components to sacrifice. One is engagement, and the other one, Prabhupada says, is to offer. We should offer our time in the service of other devotees. Offer our talent in the service of other devotees. We should be last. In our mind and our heart, our interest should be the last. Prabhupada makes such a nice point in the conversation. Those who regard their interest as last, their interest is actually first for Krishna. Very nice point. But those who regard their interest as first, actually their interest becomes last. Because Krishna is always looking for one who is selfless in devotional service. So it is not enough just that we perform the devotional service, but how we sacrifice ourselves in performing devotional service for the pleasure of others is how we grow in devotional service. That is the real meaning of engagement. So that's why Prabhupada says, everything, and this is, I really like the way Prabhupada said it here, I'll just repeat. Prabhupada says, if we engage the mind at the lotus feet of Krishna, this is what Prabhupada says, then everything is controlled, full stop. Everything is controlled. And then, he says something so nice. Prabhupada says, Krishna will help, full stop. Prabhupada says, Krishna will help. In other words, we should not think that when we perform devotional service, by our actions, we are becoming purified. No. It is by Krishna's pleasure and the devotee's pleasure that we actually become purified. And then Prabhupada says, in some way or another, we must engage the mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. And no better person is there than Amrish Maharaj. Savai Manaha Krishna Padaravindayo. That's a very famous point, isn't it? The starting point of how he actually engaged his senses starts with his mind. Then it is Vachamsi Vaikuntha Gunanuvardhane Karao Hare Mandira Marjina Dishu. In that way, all the other senses become engaged. So you will find that when there is a description of Amrish Maharaj in Bhagavatam, the description doesn't start by saying Amrish Maharaj used his legs to go to the temple. It doesn't say he used his hands to clean the temple. No. It starts by saying that he engaged his mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. So Prabhupada now is giving us a glimpse that if we really want to develop the urge, then we must control the mind. Why? Because one who tries to control the mind by engaging it in Krishna's service, Krishna controls the mind. Rishikena Rishikesha. What is that? Bhakti Uchati. Right? That's the key. The science, the secret is, we cannot control our senses. Who is the controller of senses? Rishikesha. So Prabhupada says, if you engage your senses in his service, he controls your senses and he directs them. So today we learn one thing from Prabhupada. We learn that instead of thinking of how to control the senses, we should try to think of how to engage our senses. It is much more congenial, it is much more practical, because artificially we cannot control our mind. We should engage it. And that's why each one of us, the year is ending now, we should introspect now and ask ourselves, next year, what will I take up in engagement that will further increase my devotional service? How will I engage myself? How will I engage this mind which is chanchal by nature? How will I engage it more and more and more so that I become completely controlled by Krishna, not controlled by the mind? And when one becomes controlled by Krishna, Then Krishna as Rishikena, he directs our senses. Then he directs our senses. That's why for a devotee, he doesn't have to worry about where his senses go. As long as he's engaged in Krishna's service, he can sleep very peacefully. When Arjuna took a vow, and he was supposed to make great killings, and he went to sleep, and Krishna was very afraid. The next day, Bhishma Dev and all the other Kauravas would thwart the vow of Arjuna to kill, what was his name? Jayadratha. Yes, Jayadratha. To kill Jayadratha. So then what happened? Krishna became very anxious. And in the night, he could not sleep. The Supreme Personality of Godhead suffered from insomnia, transcendental insomnia. He could not sleep. So what did he do? He came out of his camp and he goes into the camp of Arjuna. And to his surprise, Arjuna is sleeping very soundly. So he wakes up Arjuna and says, "Man, can you imagine?" He says, "Arjuna, aren't you anxious? You took a vow and tomorrow by sunset you don't kill Jayadratha. Then you have promised to go into the fire. And you have the entire Kaurava army led by no less a great warrior than Bhishma Dev himself to contend with. How are you going to do this? How can you sleep?" And Arjuna just opened his eyes for a while and he said, "I am sleeping because you are worried. I am sleeping because you are awake. I have full faith in you. I know that I am only an instrument in your hands." This is such a nice point, because when we understand that we are under the control of Krishna, when we submit to being under the control of Krishna, then we know with full faith that He will direct us. He will direct us. How does He direct us? Through the medium of Bhagavad Gita. How does He direct us? Through the medium of Bhagavatam. How does He direct us? Through the instructions of our founder Acharya. How does He direct us? Through the instructions of our spiritual masters. How does He direct us? Through the instructions and the service of all the devotees here. If you combine all this together, then you will find that there are so many ways Krishna is actually directing us. All we have to do is submit to the direction. That's the key. In Patanjali's system of yoga, there is no submission because there is no heart. It is mechanical. But if you think of the monkey, he kept his heart very safe. And Prabhupada said, "Keep your heart only for Krishna." Such a nice point. Prabhupada told his disciples, you can go anywhere and chant. You can go to all the difficult places and chant. But if you do not want to become disturbed by all those places, always keep your heart with Krishna. Very nice point. Prabhupada told the brahmacharis, you can go out and distribute books, but your heart must always be with the deities. See, that's why in all the temples when they do book distribution, the next day they offer the books and their efforts to the deities, because their heart is with the deities. That is the reason why Prabhupada established such a beautiful way of approaching Krishna. And so Prabhupada then winds down the lecture by saying that this is the main point, engagement. And he then says, besides engagement of the senses, Prabhupada ends by crystallizing one particular thing that we must engage. And he says we must engage this jiva, this tongue. Until we engage this tongue, it is very hard to engage all other senses. So mind is the principle, but the commander-in-chief of all the other senses is actually the tongue. Why? Because this tongue has two functions which are very important. One, it just likes to gobble anything and everything. And two, it likes to speak. And both of these are potentially damaging for devotional service, isn't it? If you eat anything which is not offered to Krishna, it contaminates your consciousness. You try just 7 days, I'm not suggesting you try. Just 7 days, go out there and eat anything that's not offered to Krishna, morning, afternoon and night. By the end, not even end of 7 days, 2-3 days, you find your consciousness is very dull. It's very dull. Because the tongue has become used to sense gratification. It is not becoming purified, it is dull. And the second thing about the tongue, Prabhupada says, is it is always used to speak. Therefore, we must speak about Krishna. Prabhupada ends by saying very nicely, whatever we do, our first business is, whenever we meet each other, try to speak about something related or connected to Krishna. That's very important. So if two devotees meet, got nothing to say, speak about the weather, no point. But if two devotees meet and say, Prabhu, how are you? And if you say, I'm fine, Prabhu, and how are you doing? I'm alright. And perhaps you say, Prabhu, I read something from Prabhupada's lecture, or I heard something from Prabhupada's lecture that was really nice, you find that the conversation heads in a very different angle. But the moment two people come together and speak, hey, you heard that Prabhu did this, and that Mataji said that, where's Krishna? So Prabhupada warns us. He says, every problem that this body and every urge for self-realization is thwarted, stopped, blocked when the tongue is not controlled. You think about Bhagavatam, everybody who did not use their tongue to chant Krishna's name got into trouble in Bhagavatam. Really did it. Durvasa Muni. Think about it. Did he say anything nice to Ambarish Maharaj? No. All he told Ambarish Maharaj is, you have broken your fast. I don't think he even greeted him nicely. He just used his tongue to curse him. You remember Daksha? How Daksha insulted Lord Shiva? All that came from his tongue, if you remember. In fact, my Guru Maharaj said, not only your tongue, anything related to the mouth, if you don't use it for Krishna, you're also in trouble. Because when he stated this way, there was a sage, I think his name was Pula. What happened was when Daksha criticized him, when Daksha criticized Lord Shiva, this sage smiled and showed his teeth. So in punishment, when Lord Shiva cut off the head of Daksha, he then got Virabhadra actually punched Pula in such a way that all his teeth came out. And then he gave him the benediction that after this, henceforth, you will never have teeth. So you cannot eat anything. If you ever want to eat anything, go and borrow some teeth from your disciples. And that's how he was actually chastised. Why? Because he smiled when a Vaishnava was offended. It's a good point for us to remember. If we hear somebody criticizing someone and we smile, we have to really check our smile then. Because Bhagavatam says we won't have our teeth for long. So the tongue is so dangerous. Durvasa Muni got into trouble because of his tongue. Daksha got into trouble because of the tongue. Because of his tongue, he lost his head. Really, literally. He literally lost his head. Third person that we remember is Chitraketu Maharaj. Chitraketu Maharaj had darshan of Sankarshan, became a little bit prideful. And what happened? Saw Parvati Mata on the lap of Lord Shiva, laughed, and then remarked, what an amazing sight this is. Lord Shiva, master of the senses, sitting down and having Parvati Mata on his lap. It was not really necessary. And for that he was cursed. So you see, Jai and Vijay, they were standing at the door. And then they saw Sanat Kumaras walking in. And when they just walked in like children, Jai and Vijay got very angry. And they said very rude and angry words. And when they said angry words, Sanat Kumaras also became angry. And they said, if you two are supposed to be members of the Vaikuntha club, you're not supposed to be Kunta, anxious. But your nostrils are flared, your eyebrows are raised. You don't belong to this place. Better you take birth in material world. So what was driving all this? Prabhupada makes the argument that all this was being driven by lack of control of the tongue. Lack of control of the tongue. So Prabhupada ends by saying, please remember what Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said. And we chant it every time before we take prasadam, right? Sarira?
Avidyachal.
This body is a network of problems. And Prabhupada doesn't use the word network the way we normally use. We always say network, let's network, Prabhu, we have to network. Prabhupada says network here is, it's like you are put into the net and thrown into the ocean. Where can you move? And yet in material world, when we say network, we're talking all about moving, isn't it? But Prabhupada says it differently. The Acharya says, it's like you catch something, put it in the net, and you throw it away in the ocean. Then, I didn't understand what that meant until he said the next line. In the next line he says, just like all of us, we are all trapped in this body. This body is the net. And then we are cast into the ocean of material birth and death. Now he's given a totally different paradigm of what network is actually. So the conclusion to this, Prabhupada says, please understand that if we want to develop an urge for self-realization, one thing that's really important is for us to understand that we must engage our senses. It is in engagement that we get control. And if we do not engage our senses, then somehow or another, if it's not engaged for Krishna, it will be engaged for Maya. We cannot escape that. That is something we have to know. And we have to help each other. On our own, very difficult. We have to somehow or another engage each other. Let's do something for Krishna. Let's do something for Krishna. Day and night we should be thinking what to do for Krishna. Next year is coming, right? What shall we do for Krishna? Starting from 1st January, what shall we do for Krishna? Forget 1st January. Tomorrow also is fine. Why do we have to wait for 1st January? What do we do for Krishna? What can we do more for Krishna? This year I did 4 rounds of chanting nicely for Krishna. But I want to chant better for Krishna. It's very important. And I want to end by saying, because I use the word chanting here, I want to end by saying that if you have time, please read the purport of 4th canto, 7th chapter, 24th verse. 4, 7, 24. Because the whole point Prabhupada says of our life, self-realization, is to glorify Krishna. It is actually to glorify Krishna. This jiva, this tongue, is meant not for the glorification of ourselves, it's meant for the glorification of the Lord. But Prabhupada writes in the purport of 6, 7, 24, he says in the middle of that purport, it is not possible for any ordinary living entity to understand or to glorify the unlimited personality of God. So, he's asking us to glorify, but in the purport he says it's not possible for any ordinary living entity. And we are all in that category. But then he says very nicely here. He says, but one can offer prayers or service to the Lord according to one's particular capacity. Very important. Who will know your particular capacity? Your spiritual masters. The senior devotees with whom you work with. They know your capacity. We very often don't know our own capacity. Very often our mind will tell us, no, cannot do so much. We will always limit our capacity. You notice, a sign of an advanced devotee is he never limits his capacity. He or she will stretch until cannot stretch. But the sign of the struggling devotees, they will say, this one I cannot do, that one I cannot do, this one I can't do because of that one I can't do because of this. In the end, we don't do anything. That's what happens. So Prabhupada is saying, according to your capacity. And now Prabhupada gives us the clue. How do you increase this capacity? Because sometimes we say, Prabhu, I don't have capacity to serve Krishna. How do I increase it? Prabhupada gives the side here. In the purport, he says, this capacity is increased by the service spirit, SS. This capacity is increased by the service spirit. Sevan mukhe jivadam. It means service of the Lord begins with the tongue. Prabhupada says the same thing he said in the lecture in the purport. He says it begins with the tongue. Then what does he mean? He says this refers to chanting. By chanting Hare Krishna, one begins the service of the Lord. So the real service that we must never forget amidst all our other services is how we are chanting Krishna's name. And he says so nicely, another function of the tongue is to taste and accept Krishna's prasad. Same point that he's saying in the purport, in the lecture. So the conclusion Prabhupada says in this purport, in the purport of today, and in the lecture is twofold. One, be very careful not to make bhakti mechanical. If we make bhakti mechanical, then it is like Patanjali's system of yoga. Just do it because I have to do it. Instead, remember the crocodile and remember the monkey. It is the heart that is important. Krishna never sees material qualifications. Never. He is not interested in material qualifications. In Bhagavatam, in so many parts of our scriptures, so many times we understand that Krishna is never interested in material qualifications. All he wants to know is how are we engaging our senses for him according to our personal capacity. So it is not for one devotee to judge another devotee. Very important. We should always encourage a devotee. We should never say, why you're not doing this? Why you're not doing more? No. Because we don't know the devotee's personal capacity. We discourage devotees when we do that. Rather, we should fan the fire. We should really genuinely praise them when they do something nice. We should genuinely encourage them when they are doing something for the service of the Lord. In such encouragement, we become more encouraged to pursue the urge for self-realization. And that is how Prabhupada encouraged all his disciples. You will hear from Prabhupada's disciples that while Prabhupada could be a taskmaster sometimes, and he could be very hard and heavy, but he was as soft as a flower very often also. He was so soft. And when he was soft, he was always encouraging. Anything that anyone did for Krishna, Prabhupada became so happy. He ignored so many material disqualifications of the persons. If you remember, someone was smoking a cigarette while actually carving out the deities of Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra. Prabhupada did not hold it against him. And today that devotee is one of the stalwart devotees of our movement. He never held it against him. Prabhupada always looked at that point. And this that Prabhupada has done is not something that Prabhupada invented. It is actually in our whole parampara. In our entire parampara, all the acharyas have done that. You know what Rupa Goswami says in Padyavali? There's a very famous anthology of poems. Rupa Goswami says, it's nicely translated. You can chant it with me. We'll chant the translation because we don't have time. Rupa Goswami is asking questions.